So François, welcome, and thank you for being here today on a Saturday morning. Even if you're speaking just now, you were here since 10 a.m. I saw you. You chose not to give a keynote, but rather opt for a more conversational frame for that session. So what I suggest is that I'm going to ask a few questions. I'm going to ask less questions than expected, and offer the audience to ask one or two questions to François to make sure that you still have the opportunity to take a stand in this room. So first thing is, I have a confession to make, which I make this morning, is I didn't read your book yet, which leads me to my first question about the title, which I did read. The title is Learning in the 21st Century. I'm not sure if it's written here, Learning in the 21st Century. My first question is, what's that specific about the 21st century, and what is that specific about learning in the 21st century compared to learning in the 20th century or compared to learning 2,000 years ago?
So if you look within the brain, learning is about changing neural connections, and that's very much the same since millions of years. But if you look at what the opportunities for learning and the reasons for learning, they are pretty different. Okay? Because we are living in a world of accelerating change, and so what the previous generation knew for a fact may not be sufficient to survive in the 21st century. You probably have to invent new things. So indeed, you have to learn how to learn. You have to learn how to face, the climate crisis, the biodiversity crisis, and all the crises we've been discussing. And you have to learn how to do this ethically. Okay? Because in the previous centuries, we've grown science and technology exponentially, but not the ethical dimension. Whereas Aristotle knew that episteme, techne, and phronesis, science, technology, and ethics, had to go together. That's not what we are teaching these days. So we have to learn very differently. We have to make sure that we learn to take care of ourselves, to take care of others, but also to take care of the planet. And that's not something that had to be a priority in previous centuries.
Thank you very much. That was a pretty straight to the point answer. Thank you. I might be able to ask all of them. My second one is more about you. How do you feel? What gives you hope? What are the signals that you see in France or at the international level that makes you think that educating changemakers is something that is feasible to achieve?
Well, first, it's happening. It's happening. We heard some example this morning. There is thousands of other examples throughout the world, and that's, that makes me quite hopeful. But the question is, how do we scale these things? How do we go from those nice signals that are local signal to a global change? And that's, I think, meetings like this are quite interesting because, they get together people that are interested in these issues and they can start exchanging, but you need to do this at scale. And so one of the things we are starting to discuss with UNESCO, UNESCO is the United Nations for Education, Science and Culture organization, and they decided together with the United Nations to have the 17 sustainable goals, developmental goals as a priority. One of them is education, but you have to educate the next generations of change makers. You have to make every kids, every student on this planet able to understand those challenges and be ready to tackle them. So instead of just memorizing and compute, which obviously machines do much better than we do, you have to train the next generations to understand the complexity of the world, which is not an easy task, and then you have to have them understand that they can act and then can act positively. But acting positively in one dimension sometimes is not so positive on other dimensions. That's why you have to understand the complexity of the connections.
Thank you. One other question that I have is related to the fact that we often say that we need to change the system, like it's an external force that will enable people to flourish as change makers. How about the idea of changing yourself before, or self-educating as a change maker? There is increasingly strong literacy around the idea of changing coming from an internal force rather than an external force. Spiritual leaders saying that there won't be any external change. There won't be any change in the external climate if there is no change in the internal climate of individuals. You in your book are mentioning or referring to the Ikigai concept. What's the role of individual in self-educating as changemakers?
So let me explain the Ikigai, and then maybe I guess we can go back to the precise question. So the Ikigai is a Japanese word that is, some people translate it like the reasons to wake up in the morning, which is a tough one, especially on a Saturday morning. But it's also the path towards meaning and a meaningful life. And that's obviously even harder than waking up in the morning. And yet it has to happen every day, and you have to get somewhere, and so you have to work on yourself. But so this Japanese concept has been reshaped and redesigned by various people around the world that start to design that if you really want to find your Ikigai, you have to work on 4 dimensions that are complementary and look for their intersection. The first one is to know what you like, which is a lot of internal thinking. The second dimension is what can you do, or especially if you're a learner of any age, what can you learn to do? That's the second dimension. The third dimension is what does the world need? And as I was mentioning, the United Nations make this nice priority list of 17 top priorities with 169 targets. We can all start to learn about them and then understand what the world truly needs. And then we can look at what are the resources that you can find to develop your potential, do things you like, do things that are impactful to the world. And these resources are many dimensions of the resources. Getting a salary is one of them, but there is many others, like finding people that have the same aim, the same goals than you do, finding material to learn, finding opportunities to work on, finding people that share the same passion and want to move together. And in fact, we can be resources for one another in that dimension. So in fact, if you look at that Ikigai, what I like about it is that it connects the inner person and the global needs. And there is a path that it indicates that you can work upon. And so one of the things we are starting to think of is, how can we connect these individual needs, this individual desire, and the global challenges. And so we have the individual will to contribute to a better world. The planet badly needs it. So how do we align this interest? The thing is that there is many institutions between us and what we can do. And so what we have to do is align the school's interest, the university's interest, the teacher's interest, the professor's interest as well. And that's where institutions like the UNESCO can contribute to help this by convening all these people together. UNESCO has a big convening power. That's maybe their main power. And by inviting, artists, because it's education, science, and culture, okay? So they can convey artists, scientists, educators, students, learners of all ages, and invite them to think together, how do we redesign the curricula? How do we redesign, the way, the learning experience, and even, maybe some of the learning that can happen, say, in companies and in our lives in the multiple dimensions, and work together on this.
Thank you very much. Do you have a concrete advice for us when we get out of that room? What's the first thing we could do to find our own Ikigai?
Well, you can ask yourself those 4 questions. What it is that you truly like? What it is that you know how to do, or commit to learn, what it is that you see that the world truly needs, what's the priority in this for you, and then what are the resources that you can look for, and can you yourself become a resource to start helping others? And I think that's a way we can move together, because some of us might have moved a little further than others yet, but if we come together and start listening to each other, Ikigai, and I think we can also not only find our own Ikigai as an individual, we can ask it by the collective. What is the Ikigai of the organization that you work with? What is the Ikigai of a nation? What is the Ikigai of the ChangeNOW Summit?
Thank you very much. We have a few minutes left, around 6 minutes, so I would like now to open the conversation to the audience. Does anyone have a question? And I've seen someone in the room, Camille, he's 18 years old, raise your hand. He just, how to say, you got an amazing grade at school for the baccalaureate exam, and yet you did not get a space at university. Maybe, yeah, we can open that conversation with you reacting to what was shared now, or asking a question to François, as you like.
If you need me to react, just, I meet with François and you just 1 year ago, and before I'm meeting with you, I was coming out a really hard and rude, situation in my life, in my academic life and commitment life, and it was a kind of breath of fresh air to just meet people like you, because lots of young people, and me among them, want to get involved, want to commit for societal transformation, educative transformation, but firstly, usually they don't know how. And they are especially discouraged by, political affairs and that kind of political and public inertia. And so I wanted to ask you, François, because I know that you are extremely demanding about that, and Thomas, you too. I'm not talking about learners, because everyone in this room is a learner, because it's a meaning of life, lifelong learning. But who is in this room still a student or a high school student? Oh, that's great, because usually we are not we are not a lot. But I wanted to ask you how the decision makers, how the researchers, and just every stakeholders can involve young people, and not only as representatives to gain legitimacy, but to innovate and to take them as real stakeholders and real change makers.
So thanks for your question. I think that we have to involve the next generation in the redesign of universities and every learning ecosystem. That's, some of you already said this, but I think it should be a no-brainer, and yet it's not done in most places. Okay, so the little things that we've been doing locally at the CRE is basically this. We've redesigned bachelor, master, PhD program. We've redesigned, way to help kids to start asking questions and develop scientific methods based on this with a program like S'Aventurier at all ages. And I really think that, we have to empower the next generation to ask their own questions and to be more daring than the classical system forced them to be. And we have to invite them to contribute to dream and act together. And programs like Design for Change or Bâtisseurs de Possible in France are typically things that prove that this can be very impactful. But we have to scale those things, and we have to invite everyone in the room and everyone much beyond the walls of this room to come and give a voice to the next generation and let them organize and mobilize their collective intelligence. And we have to make a difference between, say, collective stupidity and collective intelligence. And so, we have to be able to work on all sorts of ability to, say, develop critical thinking, be able to question, use the scientific method, and define new ways to define authority. Because on the web, what's the authority? It's not the same as what it used to be, say, in universities or in school. So you have to define ways where you can distinguish things that make sense from things that are just fake news. And that's a very hard dimension.
Thank you very much. We have time for one more question, I think. Normally there are microphones that should be getting your way.
Thank you. My question would be, if we had one first next step, and you had the power to advise deciders, what would be the first next step into change, according to you?
So I recently gave a report to the government about a learning society, and when I talked to Audrey Azoulay, that's the Director General of UNESCO, she decided to translate this into the different languages of UNESCO and the UN. And it's basically, maybe the next step is to build a learning planet. Okay? So what I will call a learning planet is a planet where every time one of us learn and innovate, one of us elsewhere on the planet can learn and innovate faster, because the first one have documented and shared. And to some extent, we are a learning species. We have done this sort of exercise on a local scale around the fire camp ever since we've invited fire. But today we have modern technologies that allow us to document and share our learning and innovations at scale. But we have not designed the technologies for this so far. We've designed technology to sell ads and all sorts of commercial products. So can we think of ways to use the technology that are truly empowering, that are there to ideally build, say, a knowledge map? You want to know where you are in the knowledge map. You want to know where are learning opportunities on the knowledge map. And you want to know what is the fastest route between where you are and, say, a new job that is emerging that you want to go for. And maybe others have already done part of that path from where you are to that exciting new opportunities. And if they map it and they leave a trail, then you will be able to find it and follow it for a while, probably not forever, because you will decide to bifurcate later to go to some yet other challenges that you define for yourself. But I think we need to be able to build the technologies that are typically know thyself type of technology and Socratic technologies, in the sense that they allow you to question yourself, to question the world, and to move forward.